Hey everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm creating another card with my new Cricut machine. You may have seen in the last video, I created a card using my machine. So today I'm creating a spa themed card for my sister. So I created this lotus flower pattern using Adobe Illustrator. And so as you've seen in the preview, I do want to make this kind of a patterned background that has die cuts all the way through. And so I've uploaded this into the design space for Cricut. I just need to connect my machine here. I'm doing everything Wi-Fi off of my iPad, and up until this point I have not printed from my iPad to my Cricut. So I got that set up pretty easily. It wasn't too complicated at all, and it takes me right through to the design space. And it's very similar as using the desktop version, which is the one that I have been using up until this point. So I'm just choosing the paper, and I've chose 80-pound cardstock and just regular sensitivity. I should have did a pressure sensitivity of more pressure just because my blade's getting kind of wore down, but it did work okay for what I needed. So here is the Cricut cutting out the pattern, and this pattern had a lot of die cuts and it was pretty intricate. So I was impressed that it did such a good job, and with that cardstock it's pretty thick, and I wasn't expecting it to get those sharp corners as well as it did. So now I'm going to peel it off my mat, and they recommend peeling the mat away from your work instead of peeling your work away from your mat. And what that means is it's not curling your work by pulling on that piece of paper. Instead, by curling the mat, it allows my paper to stay flat and doesn't curl it accidentally. Now you can see it did miss cutting some of the more intricate parts and a little bit of the edge too. So I did come over this with an X-Acto knife. But again, as I mentioned, my knife blade in my Cricut is really old. It's getting worn down. Not really old, but used a lot, I guess. And paper will really dull a knife too. So I do need to pick up a new knife. So in the meantime, I'm going to work on the background. So I have a piece of mixed media cardstock, and I'm going to do some ink blending. I have Distress Inks in Squeezed Lemonade, Cracked Pistachio, and Picked Raspberry. And so I picked these colors because they reminded me the most of the lotus flower. So the story behind this card is it's my sister's birthday, and we're surprising her with a trip to the spa because she always talks about it. And we know that she would like this gift. So I wanted to do sort of a spa themed card. And so these colors remind me of a lotus flower, or very whimsical spa colors as well. Something light and pastel-y. So that's kind of the thought behind the background pattern that I created. And then these color choices as well. So I'm just doing a simple top-down blend, starting with that picked raspberry and just doing a third of the page with that color, and then I'm going to come in with a Squeezed Lemonade next and do that center section and blend that into the top and bottom of those two colors. So I'll do the Cracked Pistachio on the bottom too. And so these are just the regular Distress Inks from Tim Holtz. They're not the Distress Oxide, although you could use those as well. You might have a little bit of a more opaque result, but they would also be really nice. So just getting these done up, and I like this color combination because it gives a little bit of a rainbow, a little bit of interest, but they're not too jarring. They're still kind of very light and soft together as a palette, and I like the way that they came together, especially with the green. It brings in that earth tone and that nature element, and the colors just seem to work really nicely together. So I'm just getting this blended with my circle blenders, and here's a look at that blend. I actually have it upside down, so I'll just switch it around, and just thinking like a flower, and the pink would be the flower top and the green would be the leaves. So I'm just going to grab the sentiment from this stamp set from Lawn Fawn, and this is the Jump for Joy stamp set. I just want to write happy birthday, very simple. And so I'm going to use VersaFine ink to get those crisp lines with that smaller sentiment. So I have my acrylic block here to pick up my stamps with, and I'm just going to grab the sentiment out of this. And those two pieces, I will have to stamp these in two because they are separated. So I'll start with the happy, and I'm going to pick this up off my desk. This is a good trick to do, especially if you have a longer sentiment. The stamp will naturally fall straight, and so if you come in and pick it up, opposed to trying to line it up on your acrylic block with your hands, you can get that stamp pretty straight. It doesn't have any curves in the line or anything. I've blocked off the part of the sentiment that I don't want to stamp just with some Post-it tape. And then I'm just going to pull that off now that I have it all inked up, just to get that happy portion of this sentiment piece. So here I'm just going to stamp it on some cardstock as well. This is just leftover cardstock from what came off of my Cricut mat. And I wasn't happy with how it stamped. It didn't come out very dark, so I went and did it again, just flipped it over and restamped it there. And I just was more careful with putting a little bit more ink on the stamp and pushing a little bit harder. And it was a better impression that way. So for this one, I just want to mask out that birthday sentiment. I believe it says something like, "It's your birthday," or something like that. So I'll take the Post-it tape off and then just line it up, and this will put the sentiment together. Now the thing with the Versamark ink, or VersaFine ink I guess, is it takes a little bit longer to dry. So you really do have to be careful that you don't smudge that ink. So now I'm just going to trim down the sentiment piece just to a nice little rectangle that can sit on the card. So here it is, just very, very simple. I wanted it very clean, not too ornate to distract from the background. When I bought the tools for my Cricut, I got these cool little tweezers, and so they're pretty handy with holding the sentiment piece, and I can move it around and kind of see positioning. I could do something right aligned, right justified, something in the bottom, but I think I'm just going to go very simple, keep it very dead center and very symmetrical with that pattern overall. So I just put my ruler to the side so that I could find where the center point is. And I'm going to put this on with some foam tape. So this is a look at the foam tape that I use. And I just picked this up at my local Staples. And I'm just going to run some of that around the back here. And it's about half or double the width of that border. So if I trim this in half, I should be able to run some foam tape all along the frame of this background. And then by cutting the pieces in half, it just helps the foam tape go the little bit extra mile, and I can get double the length out of it. Now, because the background itself is so intricate and those lines for the lotus flowers are really thin, I'm not going to put any support behind those. Cutting, I can't even imagine cutting foam tape would be impossible. I could have cut a few versions of that and layered cardstock to make it thicker as well. That's another option. But I'm just going to leave it as is and just put a piece of foam tape in the middle behind my sentiment piece and use that as the center support. And then with the frame side, or with the foam around the frame of the background, it should be enough to support it. I'm pretty confident that it will be pretty good. So I'm just going to peel off all the backing of the tape and get this put onto my blended background and start building my card. So lining it up with the edges of my hands, I find that's the easiest way, and using the bottom of the card, lining it up to the desk, that helps too. So now I'm going to put the sentiment in that center portion right over top of that foam tape. And I'm going to put another piece of foam tape on my sentiment before I put it over top of that foam piece in the center. And this is going to give it a double height to the frame. So I'll actually have 3 layers going on in this card. So my sentiment is on the top layer, and the background frame is on the second layer, and then the blended background is on the bottom layer. Now I'm being careful not to smudge my sentiment because it's still drying, and so I'm just very carefully pushing around the edges to seal that foam tape down. So the tool of my little tweezers came in handy too, using that to push on the edges of the tape as well. So now I'm ready to put this on the background, and normally I would put the foam tape on the back of my artwork, but because that sentiment is still a little bit wet, I'm going to put not the foam tape, but the tape roller on the back of my card base instead. And then lining that up with the edges of my hands against the bottom of the card on the desk, I'll just push it into place as well. So this card was really fun to create. It's a little bit different, and the most of the work I think went into the design, and just trimming out the lotus flower pattern. And it was really delicate, but I just love how it turned out. It was very dainty and ornate and very light, and I just love the overall look. I like the shadows that the lotus flowers create as well. So here's a look at the final card. And I love the rainbow too. Just distress inks are so pretty. They always look really nice. I will put this pattern linked in my Etsy shop if you want to download the pattern. And the links will be in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos. Thank you so much for watching.